job interviews can be terrifying. I'm sure many of you have gone into a job interview of one kind or another at this point in your life. That feeling of sitting there, somebody seemingly judging your qualifications for this position, you're nervous, and then the nerves get even worse after the interview when you sit and wait to hear back whether or not you got the job. It's sort of a terrifying process. I think the idea is to gain confidence in the process so that you could go in, be your best, and hope for the best. Because in the end, it's up to the employer whether or not they select you, but it is up to you how well you're going to prepare for the interview. So, taking what we've learned so far in public speaking, which is obviously geared for many people in an audience, talking with an interviewer one on one is a little bit different, but a lot of the rules apply. So let's dig into it. I could probably spend an entire day talking about the different interviews that I've had in my life for jobs, how they've gone, what the outcomes were, funny moments. Suffice it to say, I've had some where I didn't really have to do much. They offered me the job on the spot. Others might have taken over an hour. There were a huge grilling process. When I came out, I was exhausted. I've had everything in between. I remember in college, Abercrombie and American Eagle, you just walked in the store and they're like, "Hey, do you want a job?" So I've kind of seen them all. Um, but I also know it's you're really putting yourself on the line. It's kind of like a blind first date sort of thing where you really feel like you're being judged, and your mind is just constantly racing, especially if it's a job you really want that you've maybe been working all through college to get you. It's the career choice for you. Well, let's start thinking how we can make sure going in that we increase our chances of getting the job. Well, first and foremost, it's about the interviewer. They're with the company, they have a need, and you're telling them that you might be able to supply that need for them. They, in turn, would supply you with a job. But we're looking at them from the perspective of how do they think and perceive you? And we're constantly being aware of how they're perceiving us, and we need to adjust accordingly, whether we're unsure it's going well or not. And online it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So for the sake of this, we're going to be kind of talking more about in person, but the rules still really apply for some of this. So how do we know how they're feeling about us at a given time? Well, if we use this solar formula, which is squarely facing, that means our shoulders matching, we're facing each other in a clear, distinct way. Again, if it's online, it's the same thing. It's just mirrored. Am I open in my posture towards the camera? Am I squarely facing the camera? Or, like we talked before, am I low? Is the camera looking up my nose or looking down at me? That nice eye level as though they're sitting straight across from you is what you want. So good, squarely facing the camera, open posture, shoulders back. Are you leaned in a little bit? Just think of that like the times you lean in a conversation and lean back and relax. All right. We want to be leaning in. It shows we're invested in what's going on. And we can perceive that from whoever's interviewing us. Are they leaning in? Are they engaged with what I'm saying? Are they making eye contact? And that, again, online would look like, are they looking directly in the camera? Sometimes it's hard to tell it, because the where you are on the screen might be a little off, but you can kind of tell, are they nodding? Are they, engaged with what you're saying? And then you know that they're looking directly at you. They'll probably be taking notes, something like that at the same time. But just be reading, how are they engaged with me at a particular time? Do they seem relaxed? Is their body relaxed? If they're uptight and they're, just very kind of pensive, it might seem like they're trying to want to move along and get to the next person. So we want to be observant where they are in this solar acronym, these nonverbal behaviors that kind of give us a good response, that we can kind of change how they're feeling. This is all kind of indicative of another acronym, the WAT, the willingness and ability to think. So, with this, our potential hirer is in two states. They're either a low watt, meaning they're not using critical thinking skills, or they're at a high watt, meaning that they're looking for very concrete, tangible proofs of what you're saying. They're engaged kind of at a higher level of absorbing the information that you're saying. So our arguments become important. They become integral to what we're trying to say when we're trying to persuade them that we're the one that they need to hire for the job. And then we also indicate these kind of cues, these jumping off points that don't require too much thought. So what do I mean by that? Well, a high watt, meaning somebody who's critically thinking a lot at this time, they're going to want concrete proofs like references, credentials. Did you graduate? Do you have your master's? What is your degree in? They might be looking at that stuff more carefully. Those are definitive proofs of whether or not you're capable of doing the job. Now, they might be a low watt, meaning that they're not looking at things from more of an analytic standpoint in terms of concrete proofs. They're going to be looking for other cues like, are you a friendly person? Are you a confident person? Um, those things will start to mean more to a low watt person than a high watt. We want to try and get them in that high watt, that high critical thinking state, though. Um, Again, are they leaning in? Are they making eye contact? This is indicative of them being at a high watt state. And if they're not there, it's a good idea for you to get them to that state by maybe turning the table and asking them a question like, are my qualifications what you're looking for? Get them to start critically thinking what it is that you want to get them at that higher state of the wattage. And the high watt interviewer, somebody who's clearly demonstrating that they're using critical thinking skills throughout the interview, they're going to require your best arguments. And again, good concrete proofs. So keep in mind, it's about the other, not you. It's fulfilling their needs in getting this job, this position filled, right? So the company is somebody with a need, and you're here to help say, I can solve this need for you. Follow that SOLAR acronym: squarely face, open posture, lean in, eye contact, relaxed body. And then we're also looking for that in whoever is interviewing us. We want to monitor and manipulate the wattage through our arguments and then the cues that we give off. We want to get them to a high watt state. We want to provide strong arguments. And again, we're monitoring at all times the SOLAR, and are they at a high or low state of critical thinking? So some things to consider, statements, phrases that are going to just, I think, help get you, since you're kind of coming out of college into starting in a new field. So you could say things like, even though I've never been paid to do blank before, I already know that I rock at it because I've successfully done blank in the past. So for me, coming out of grad school as a filmmaker, let's say I didn't have experience as a filmmaker before school. I did, but presumably, let's say I didn't. So even though I've never been paid to be a filmmaker before, I already know I rock at it because I've successfully done my master's thesis film. So I know what I can accomplish. Don't worry that you're not the best at whatever it is that the field that you're going into. I think there's a certain level of confidence that you can bring to it, and enthusiasm. So saying something like, I'm certainly not the world's foremost expert on filmmaking yet, but I'm constantly growing and refining my craft. Just recently, I did blank, which helped me get much better at blank. So I could say something like, just recently, I filmed a commercial, which helped me get much better at my videography and my editing skills. So these are things that you can all apply to what you're saying, even though you're in college. There's something that you've done that shows you have some experience and you have some interest in whatever this field is. And it's okay to do a little bragging on yourself. So things like, to be perfectly honest, I know I'm amazing at communication. And I've learned from experience that I don't want to be stuck in a cubicle all day. I want to be out filming, whatever the case may be, that you know that they're looking for in their job. They want a person who meets these credentials. Focus on the employer's needs, not yours. Reflect on the job itself. So, excuse me, research the company, research what it is they do. Usually online, you can find a mission statement and you can see this company believes in this, this company supports this, this company is growing and expanding in these ways. So, the more you know about the job, the better it will be. Sometimes you'll even know somebody maybe who works there and you can get information from them, like what are the qualifications they're looking for, things like that. And a lot of times when you see a job ad, it's going to have what they're looking for in there. But you can always do as much research as you want because it's only going to help you. You can address if it's a cultural fit. So maybe an unconventional place to work that could, fit in. I think of these like young startup tech companies, and it's like they bring their dogs to work. They don't really have cubicles. It's kind of a open concept atmosphere, right? And you could talk about that you love the culture of the workplace environment, that you think you'd be a good fit for it because of this. You want to avoid cliches. Probably they're going to hear them often. They're going to hear the same things like, I'm, if you feel like you can almost tell when you start to say it, like, okay, they've probably heard this like 15 times a day as they're doing this interviewing process. I work too hard. I care too much. Just things like that. You want to just be your authentic self. Be motivated. Don't hold back. Be honest. Be brutally honest about who you are because that's what avoids those cliches because there's no one quite like you. You're going to bring something unique to the table that may or may not fit with what they want. But it's, I think, good to consider as you're doing this. What do I want to avoid saying? And kind of having one of the hardest interviews I went to wasn't actually for a job, it was to get into Florida State's master's program. It was a 1 day long interview. We're just going to multiple different faculty, students. We had all sorts to do. It was exhausting. But beforehand, I started to think of almost every question I can think of that I might get asked during the day. And I started to think about what my response be to this. And you know what? They were typical. Even though my response wasn't cliched, the questions were. I could kind of guess they're going to ask me something like this, and I could start thinking about my response. I don't want to read it from, a note, but I want to be comfortable in what I have to say, and I can practice it. Um, so maybe beforehand, start writing the questions out. Start thinking of what your response would be. Have somebody else interview you, just like you practice your speech. Do a practice interview. It couldn't hurt. It'll be good at you having to improvise. That is, not necessarily making something up, but a question you might not have anticipated coming. It will get you comfortable in responding adequately to that question. So do your homework. Don't hold back. Be your authentic self. tell that crazy story about your passion for what it is that you're doing. My early days of getting jobs on film, I would tell them, I homeschooled my senior year of high school so that I can start working on films that were coming to my town. That's how dedicated I am to the craft of filmmaking. And that helps you stand out. Wow, that's the kid who gave up his senior year. So tell them that story about your passion. Find ways that get you to get them engaged in what it is you have to say. Make them like you at that high wattage level where they're critically thinking about what it is you're saying, your references, your credentials, but then also them liking you as a person. As someone who runs a business and has, supplied people with work, there's times where I would much rather have somebody who's enjoyable to be on set versus doesn't have quite as good as skills as somebody else, but they're not fun to be around for 16 hours a day. So keep that in mind too. Just be yourself, relax and say a prayer. You'll do great. This will be a good way for you to practice giving a speech. I look forward to what all of you have to say.